Thank you, Dr. English. And now for our keynote, I want to introduce our next speaker. As a Peter L. Benson Professor of Applied Developmental Science and the Executive Director of the Thrive Center for Human Development, Dr. Pamela Ebstyne King's academic and applied efforts aim to promote a movement of human thriving that contributes to flourishing societies. Her primary research interests lie at the intersection of thriving and spiritual development. She has conducted research funded by the BioLogos Foundation, John Templeton Foundation, and Tyndale House. In addition to her scholarship, she finds deep joy in teaching and mentoring students at Fuller Theological Seminary. Reverend Dr. King joins us from Pasadena, California, where she lives with her husband, Brad, and her 3 children. Please welcome Dr. Pam Ebstyne King.
Good morning. It is such a privilege to be with you all here. Reverend Dr. English, thank you so much for presenting that national vision for something that has been overlooked so long. And selfishly, I'm thrilled because that has driven my life. I am behind the lip gloss. My niece calls me a nerd with lip gloss. I am a nerd. Sandy mentioned being holistic. I'm going to be a little bit of the mind today and hope to share some of my research and also research of other people around the country that are looking at how spirituality, faith, and religion are helping health and wholeness, and I like to use the word thriving. And so bear with me, but I hope that, in a sense, education can help give you a lens to see how spirituality, and that's the word I'll tend to use today, or faith, may be leveraged for the community work that you're all doing. But before I launch into that, I want to say thank you. I am an academic. I am an ordained Presbyterian minister, but to a ministry of equipping. So I do a lot of research, and I teach, and I lead something called the Thrive Center. But you all are on the front lines with people, and it gives me great heart and vision to imagine all the lives that are impacted directly through your work, or for those of you in more administrative roles at this point that are impacted indirectly for you. So thank you for all that. And I want to invite you in this moment and want to ask, what brings you here? And I'm going to just find my slides really quickly. What brings you here today? Not just in the moment, but at this point in your vocation or your sense of call to the very challenging work that you do. I'm curious if there was an earlier inclination of a desire to help people, or a gift that you noticed, a delight that you had in interacting with people, or was there an inspiration, maybe a call from beyond, from God or some other nature or source, or an aspiration of wanting to make change. Or maybe for some of you it was practical. You have all done a lot of work, so I'm talking about a few years ago, how you got into this line of work, whether there was a job opening or an uncle nudged you in a direction. But what was it that invited you into the work that you do today? And then secondly, Dr. English just mentioned trauma. Many of you have experienced or witnessed trauma in your work, the devastation of people you work with, of loved ones in your own life. And if not, I know you've experienced a lot of challenges, even if it's, chaos, polarization, pandemics, funding, practical things make our work hard. I'm wondering what it is for you that keeps you in this work. And a lot of the studies that I've done historically look at moral exemplars, or people who have lives that are sustained in benefiting others. And my guess is all of you around these tables today qualify as a moral exemplar, one who lives their lives truly for the benefit of others and their community. And what we have found in research is that often folks who are recognized as moral exemplars are deeply spiritual people, that there is something from beyond them, some form of transcendence, whether it might be God, your sense of the universe, whatever that organizing or ultimate sense of power is that sustains people in this relentless and hard work. Well, today, I'm really excited to share that as a psychologist, the field of psychology in the last 25 years has come a long way, and formerly not even recognizing that people are religious or have faith or spiritual, to recognizing that not only they are, but it actually tends to have a very powerful and positive impact on their lives. So we see now a lot of research that demonstrates positive health outcomes, more changes in mortality rates, suicide, also well-being indicators, mental health indicators, and positive things that are related to thriving. And this doesn't just happen at the individual level, but also communities that have higher numbers of believers or faithful or those who value spirituality have higher community indicators. From a mental health perspective, which as a psychologist, which is more my expertise, we see rates of decreased depression very consistently, decreased anxiety in some populations, in some circumstances, but not always, decreased violence, especially in youth, less substance abuse for those who report being religious or spiritual, and less suicide. So really positive things are going on for people who attend to some aspect of spirituality in their life. My research also really focuses on what I refer to as thriving. So much of psychology looks at what goes wrong with people, and regrettably, our mental health indicators are problems. So there's a newer movement within psychology that looks at what can go right with people. So we like to look at and have found that those who are of faith or spiritual tend to have more hope. They have a narrative of beliefs that create a vision and sense of hope in their lives. They have a higher sense of resilience. They have more life satisfaction, the coherence we were talking about earlier today. They have more meaning and purpose. I'll talk a bit about more of that. But I want to say religion and spirituality or faith is not a panacea. So it's not like, oh, we can just drag someone into a synagogue or a mosque or a congregation or a faith-based community and all will be well. Your beliefs might say that, well, yeah, the end game, all will be well. We'll believe that. But in the moment, spirituality, which is just the word I'm going to use today, as opposed to, but this can be associated with faith and in practice in the context of religion or secular settings, is very complex. And we're naive if we think by just putting a label of faith-based, that things will go well for people. So what I want to unpack for you today is existing research that shows what are the psychological resources that are available, potentially available, through spirituality, and especially through spiritual communities. So we find that actually in some instances, spirituality can go really wrong for people. I mean, like, let's think about the Third Reich and the Nazi movement. I'm sure there was a lot of sense of transcendence, but it was used to motivate ill will and tragedy for many people. We also find in young people, where a lot of my research has happened, when religious beliefs are shaming or clashing with a sense of identity, especially around gender and sexuality, those youth actually have higher rates of suicide when their religious beliefs shame them or reject them. So we need to be very careful and parse apart the complexities of religion and spirituality. And this is what I do. I am from the Thrive Center at Fuller Theological Seminary, and myself, along with other colleagues, both within Fuller and outside Fuller, do a lot of empirical research on looking at how religion and spirituality, for the most cases, promote, but also at times hinder concepts like thriving. We're very interested in understanding, too, how spirituality exists and acts in this very pluralistic age that we're in. And all of you coming from California know there are deep communities of devout faith. There are also increasing numbers of secularism. And doing our community-based work, whether it's spiritual care as a chaplain or community-based work, can be very complex. And we need to have that sensitivity around different narratives and beliefs. On the table outside is a little card that offers a QR code to resources that we offer through the Thrive Center, and that little QR code, for those of us who are young enough to understand what that is, can do. Look at that. But so in short, I want to unpack with you a bit how spirituality can provide psychological resources for thriving and growing into purpose. This is extremely important right now because I am sure most of you, given that you're in this room, are aware of the demographic and sociological trends around the shift in the US religious and spiritual landscape. I've, in the last several years, done a lot of work with Fetzer Institute at looking at how people are accessing and experiencing and defining spirituality. The initial round of data was collected right before COVID, and the second round of data was in 2022, and how they're experiencing spirituality actually through COVID, which is fascinating. But you're probably aware that conventional religious affiliation and attendance are really radically decreasing. And this was happening before COVID, and not surprising with pandemic and quarantines has really accelerated, but we're also beginning to see a more radical shift in people's beliefs. Often historically there was a slight decline in people saying, I believe in God, or I'm part of a specific religion, but we're actually beginning to see a shift in that self-identification. And what we're seeing an increase is in the spiritual, I'm spiritual, but not religious. Some of my work involves a dear colleague of Alexia's and mine, Sung Kim, who does a lot of extraordinary AI semantic research. And we actually looked at a nationally representative sample of statements and actually images that people drew about spirituality, what they wrote about spirituality. And despite the fact that when people are given an item on a survey to say, are you religious or this or that, the words they use still involve a lot of theistic language and God. So although we're just in this interesting time where God and senses of conventional religion are grafted into people, but how they're accessing them is really shifting and how they're living that out, just to be aware of. But we heard things around transcendence and God, or the sacred, karma, universal love, spirituality, and faith, but like God and more conventional religious words are still used dominantly. So this is my little education. Like, I'm a teacher, so I love to teach things. In the psychology of religion and spirituality, there's lots of definitions of spirituality wandering around the academic universe. I like this idea that spirituality is our experience and our response to transcendence. And just let me talk about transcendence for a moment. So transcendence is understood as a source of ultimacy. I'm not going to define metaphysics. People do that differently. But it's a source of ultimacy beyond mundane human life. And for some, that is God, or some notion of sacred, the universe, a sense of all of humanity. We have different ways, we have different beliefs around what transcendence is. For most people, this sense of transcendence has had so much ultimacy that it has a bit of an orienting or purposeful power in the universe. Now, I want to talk about this experience and response to transcendence. I am old enough that I actually did sit around a fire and sing Kumbaya in middle school. And wow, that was probably, transcendent for a Presbyterian kid from the Midwest of, the flames and the touchy-feely and harmony. But often people, when they think of spirituality, they think of this sense of like an experience, an awareness, a connection. Spirituality, yes, is that. It is something more beyond us, ineffable, something that we can't always put words to or wrap our mind around, that we sense, that we feel, that resonates with us, that has a powerful vibe. That's the word my kids use all these days. But it's also our response. Spirituality involves how we make meaning, as Dr. English mentioned, from this source of transcendence. What orders our lives? What's important? Who matters? Who values? Does everybody matter? We hope everybody matters. It also informs our identity. That's a response. Our worldview, what's right, what's wrong, what has value. And it impacts our actions. So spirituality is not just some feeling, like I think it was Chicago in the 80s that sang that song, More Than a Feeling, but it's also how we respond. And also, as Dr. English mentioned, it really helps people cope and make sense of the world, which is essential and so important these days, and contributes to our sense of resilience. So spirituality becomes very powerful when whatever your source or the people that you work with, their different ideas and beliefs around transcendence, it has an orienting power on lives, and it has the potential, as I was saying, to define and inform our identity, our narrative about our life in the world, our sense of ethics, our ultimate sense of purpose, our community, who's in the community, who's out. It provides motivation. And as I made the point earlier, not all spirituality is helpful or healthy, and that's very important to recognize. So in Thrive Center's efforts to communicate the resources within spirituality, we've developed a spiritual health framework. This is not necessarily to judge people like, oh my gosh, I'm failing in my mental health, you're failing in your spiritual health. This is more of an opportunity to provide a lens. I'm working on the graphic. I don't even know. The light colors may not show up that you see it. But it is a lens that has 6 facets that spell thrive. So the first is transcendence to the upper left corners. It has transcendence and spirituality. And I'll talk through these more in detail. But before I get into describing these different facets, I want to say that regardless of belief in worldview system, spiritual health happens when it is focused and love-based. So given that religion and spirituality can be so powerful, and history testifies to that, crusades, etc., we need to ensure that we're promoting love-based, love-centered forms of belief systems and feelings and behaviors, so that they are used to more inclusive ends rather than exclusive and detrimental ends. I want to acknowledge, like, as a psychologist, we often talk about our thoughts, our cognitions, or in the case of spirituality, our beliefs, and also our emotions and feelings and our behaviors. So as I think through each facet with you, I just want you to be mindful that there's beliefs associated and feelings and behaviors associated with all of them. So imagine love in the center of that, and I want to walk you quickly through the facets. So the first one is transcendence, which I've been talking a bit about, and that's this sense of awareness or connection to ultimacy that inspires a purposeful response. So it's really neat to me in psychology right now, this is the geek coming out, that we're actually looking at what are the psychological capacities that people need to experience transcendence. So I don't know about you, but like this can preoccupy my mind. And so in my worldview, I might want to be open to God's spirit moving. How in the heck am I gonna be open to my husband? It's my 31st anniversary, regardless of the spirit, if I'm on my phone all day long. So we're realizing that there are capacities like awareness and attention, and we're in an attention scarcity moment in this world right now. Having empathy, being able to feel other people's feelings or take other people's perspectives, these are just psychological tools. This helps us be able to apprehend some form of the abstract, some form of divine. So it's really important that we cultivate these psychological capacities that enable us to do this, and healthy forms of spirituality enable us to do this to a loving source. And when people experience love at a supernatural, divine, cosmic level, it actually does change their identity. And because when we have these emotions, positive emotions, we actually change and can grow. We've all been parented in this room, and many of us are parents, and we all know that when we're loved or offer love, people change for good in our context. When we are hurt, when we are not safe, when we are violated, we don't grow in great ways. Imagine that on a cosmic level. When people can pause and have a sense of experience of cosmic love, there's a lots of opportunities for healing and transformation. And that's something that we don't often connect to. The movement of positive psychology, there's extraordinary brain research on how when people feel safe and when they feel loved, how their brains broaden and actually build. Like our brains can keep building, not as fast as they did as babies, not quite in adolescence, but we can still grow and change. And we can move from just coping and getting by to hoping, which is a lot more powerful. So healthy spirituality not only offers transcendence, whether corporate in worship or communal service is an amazing, extraordinary experience of transcendence, but it also provides habits and rhythms, spiritual practices. And I've talked to some of you who do chaplaincy work, and there are practices that you can give families or patients. Some of you are in community organizing, and you have people who might have different practices. Reverend Julie Davis at the table offers a bunch of spiritual practices that can be implemented in pluralistic community settings, or in hospitals with people of diverse faiths. But helping people tap into healthy rhythms of life. Some religious traditions include Sabbath, rhythms of play. I wish spirituality and religion promoted more play. It's great for our brains. And I know we're all really serious in this room because we do hard work, but play is so important for you and your people. One of the assumptions around thriving in spiritual health is that people can grow and change, that they have agency. So by creating good habits, offering positive spiritual practices is a wonderful way that we can help people through incremental transformation. So healthy spirituality also offers relationships and community. As noted earlier, there are increasing trends of individual spirituality. Spirituality at its best draws us deeper into relationship with others and is also best, when I mean best, I mean for your mental well-being, experienced within the context of community, where you have examples around you, there's potential mentors, and people who can support you in your spiritual pursuits. Another powerful asset and facet of the spiritual health framework is that spirituality informs our identity and our narrative. It helps us grow in clarity of who we are as unique persons, and it also affirms who we are as part of a bigger picture, a bigger community, or part of humanity, or part of creation. And I think we're all aware of different belief systems that value the environment, the earth, more than others, or value those who are different from ourselves more than others. And we are in a day and age, for those of you who are spiritual leaders, that we need to live in a way that our own spiritual narratives can be inclusive and compassionate and respectful of those who have other narratives than ourselves. And that's the love-based aspect. But affirming people's identity, and I know young people is an emphasis of today. When young people are coming of age and trying to figure out who they are, they need spiritual beliefs that can affirm their uniqueness and also connect them to something bigger than themselves. And when spiritual beliefs negate, like a cult might be a very extreme example, when everybody has to wear a purple hoodie and was it Converse or Nikes, like we obliterate the individuality. Healthy spirituality has a beautiful balance of affirming individuality, ethnicity, our spiritual beliefs, and the communal. Another extremely powerful thing that psychology has discovered that spirituality does is offer purpose. You might have heard there's a ton of research going on around the role of purpose in people's lives. And when people, and I'm going to talk specifically adolescents, college students, and yes, even us aging adults, when we have a sense of purpose, there are so many amazing physical health benefits, mental health benefits, social benefits. Because when you know what matters, and when you have an enduring goal that matters to yourself, and contributes to the world beyond yourself, that's a working definition of purpose, an enduring life goal. It might morph. You might start as a doctor, then you get into community health. That's meaningful to you, uses your skills, but makes a contribution bigger to yourself. That helps organize your life. It actually also brings you in contact with like-minded people. It was a delight to witness people reconnecting this morning and to reconnect with friends of my past. We here today have a pretty aligned sense of purpose. We might do that differently, but we care about people. We don't want to see them just survive. We want to see them thrive. And my guess that you're here is you understand that faith, religion, spirituality is crucial to that process. And when we do that, we're around people that are like-minded, that further us in our purpose. So purpose is one of those things that continues to provide benefits. But we want to think about contributing our strengths to the world by living out our response to love, whether that's God, whatever that cosmic sense of love is, living that out as yourself, with and for others. So spiritual health should help us grow in a way that is with and for others. And lastly, and this is the facet of the spiritual health lens that people are like, oh, why do we have to talk about ethics and virtues? At least teenagers. But you all know that when we have a sense of ethics, when we know right from wrong, we live more coherent and organized lives. Moral injury has become it's a growing field of study, especially since the pandemic, because so many people weren't able to live out according to their moral standards because of issues around healthcare and polarization, et cetera. But understanding what matters and what's right and wrong and how we live that out and our virtues is extremely important to our spirituality. So that is the spiritual health framework. On our website, we actually have a lot of resources and practices that unpack each of the facets. And I will offer a QR code again at the end of this presentation. If you sign up for our newsletter, I can send you, like if I know it's today, I'll send you, or someone will send you this spiritual health model, a PDF on it that explains all of this. So spirituality promotes thriving. Spirituality at its best. When you have a healthy sense of spirituality that has community, that offers positive narratives, that informs our ethics, offers a purpose, that enables us to thrive and to grow into our strengths with and for others. An important aspect of thriving is that thriving individuals aren't just about themselves, but they contribute to flourishing communities. And the beyond the self nature of spirituality, this concept of transcendence, orients people beyond themselves, whether it's to their community, their organization, their school. That is so essential for building flourishing communities. I will just highlight, because I know a lot of you are in mental health, that some of the things that I appreciate about a spiritual health perspective is that in mental health, we are often treating symptoms. That is the job. But that often creates a deficit orientation, and we often see people through lenses of anxiety or depression or violence, where spiritual health is much more of an asset orientation and helps us look at what are the strengths and uniquenesses that can be cultivated in people for the goodness of others. So in mental health, there's often the sense of focusing on symptoms, and in spiritual health, it's much more of a focus on purpose. I love the word telos, or that sense of fullness of life. Mental health is often individually oriented. I know many of you here take a community health perspective. Spiritual health is always systems and a communal orientation. We have a lot of transcendent resources in spiritual health that mental health doesn't always access. And mental health is something that people need to be really trained and licensed in. In spiritual health, there are a lot of spiritual practitioners in this room, clergy, that have so many resources that are actually psychological that can help enhance the mental health and physical health and well-being of their people. So I want to encourage you to think about how spiritual health may be relevant in the life of your organization. In short, the QR code on the left gets you to our website. Thrive Center started a podcast called With and For this year through Fuller Seminary. I am the host, and most of my guests are quite renowned psychologists who speak about trauma, brain development, but all in the guise of how it helps people thrive. Dr. Lisa Miller is the first guest who does a lot of beautiful research on different forms of spirituality and how spirituality helps us feel loved, guided, and never alone. But I invite you to check out the podcast on your favorite podcast app and share it with your friends. Greatly appreciative of that. But I'll just wrap by saying, going back to what brings you here. What was that or is that in your life? Either a spark within you, a call beyond you. How does that sense of transcendence or maybe eminence in your own life direct you in your life, motivate you in your work with others? And how can you help ignite that in the people around you? Thank you.